Imagine a world where freedom is just a memory and every decision you make is controlled by a symbol. What would you do if your survival depended on submitting to a regime that demands more than your obedience, demands your soul? What if the future you feared had already arrived, but no one dared to fight it? The scenario is one of complete control. The streets, once vibrant with the diversity of voices and movements, are now silenced by an overwhelming presence, cameras that track every step, drones that fly over every block, and incessant advertisements on the screens that fill the horizon. The sky, polluted and opaque, seems to reflect the lack of hope. There are no stars at night, only the cold and inclement light of the regime. On the megaphones scattered throughout the city, a voice resonates constantly. The voice of the beast is calm, controlled, almost mesmerizing, and at the same time carries a weight that intimidates and subdues. Order is our salvation. Submission is the key to prosperity. The words reverberate in the minds of citizens like an inevitable mantra. The mark of the beast is not just a symbol engraved on the skin. It is a passport to survival. Those who have it can buy food, access basic services, and live in apparent safety. But it exacts a high price, the total surrender of its individuality. There are no dissidents in the system. Anyone who dares to reject the brand is not only excluded from society, he is hunted, forced to live as a ghost in the shadows. The few who resist live in caves, makeshift shelters, or deep in forbidden forests. They communicate by ancient signs and have to trust each other in a world where betrayal is a constant. Every move is a risky move as the system seems ubiquitous. Even in the most remote hideouts, the sound of drones patrolling the sky is a constant reminder that there is no safe place. Daily life in cities is a spectacle of obedience. Each citizen is monitored by implanted devices which analyze heartbeat, tone of voice, and even suspicious thoughts captured by advanced technologies. Those who show signs of doubt or hesitation are quickly isolated, disappearing without a trace. However, there are rumors that the brand is more than an instrument of control. It is said to connect people directly to the beast, shaping their emotions, erasing memories, and eventually consuming their souls. For some, it's just superstition, stories told by desperate religious people. For others, it is a grim truth that they need to understand at all costs. One of these resistors, named Elias, observes the world from the shadows. He saw friends and family fall one by one, seduced by the brand's promise of comfort, or dead trying to resist. Elias, who was raised in the light of ancient prophecies, believes that there is more to the symbol than what the regime admits. His faith is unwavering, but the weight of his mission consumes him. He knows that in order to survive, he will need to rely on strangers and face dilemmas that will test the limits of his humanity. Meanwhile, in one of the secret hideouts beyond the reach of the regime, a small, scattered group of rebels discuss plans to access the beast's central archives. They believe that this is the key to understanding the true origin of the brand and perhaps how to combat it. However, every decision is a deadly gamble, as every misstep can lead to everyone's destruction. Ordinary people, those who have accepted the mark, seem to live in peace, but there is something strange about their behaviors. His eyes are empty, his expressions emotionless. Even when they smile, there is a disturbing disconnect. It is as if they are physically present, but their souls have been erased. The first glimmer of resistance comes when a cryptic message appears on screens throughout the city, interrupting the regime's announcements. The brand is not the end, it is the beginning. The truth is near. The message lasts only a few seconds before being deleted, but its existence undermines the false stability of the imposed order. The beast agents step up patrols, looking for anyone who might be behind the act of sabotage. For the resistors, it is a sign of hope. For Elias, it is a calling. He knows that the prophecies spoke of a time when truth would begin to emerge, and he believes that the time has come to act. But he also knows that the price will be high. to unimaginable levels. The atmosphere is charged with tension. The regime seems unshakable, but cracks are beginning to emerge. Will the resistance be able to survive long enough to expose the truth? Or will the weight of the system crush any attempt at freedom? Now that you know the turning point of this dystopian future, what will be your choice? Would you surrender to the mark of the beast to survive, or would you risk everything to resist? Let us know in the comments below. Share it with your friends and stay with us to find out what happens next. Click on the bell to be notified how to fight against a system that controls even your thoughts. As the days go by, the pressure on the resistance increases. Patrol drones become more numerous, and more hiding places are discovered and destroyed. Elias and the other survivors have to constantly move, seeking shelter in places not yet mapped by the regime. The group is small but determined. They have something that marks citizens do not have: hope. Elias remembers the stories his grandmother told him when he was a child, stories of a final battle between good and evil. These stories, based on the ancient prophecies, told of a time of great tribulation where only the strong of spirit would survive. He never thought he would live to see these days, but now he understands that his own life is part of this larger narrative. He feels guided by something bigger, something that encourages him to keep going, even when all seems lost. In the current hideout, an old sewer system below the city, the group analyzes the few resources they still have. Water is scarce, food almost non-existent, and tension between members begins to increase. Some believe that the only solution is to surrender to the regime and accept the brand. Others, like Elijah, see it as a betrayal of the greater purpose. During a candlelight meeting, Elias comes up with a bold plan. He suggests infiltrating the main data center of the beast, located in the heart of the city, to obtain crucial information about the brand. The place is a fortress, protected by an army of soldiers, cameras, and advanced security systems. It is a suicidal plan, but Elias is convinced that it is the only way. The idea is met with skepticism. "You're crazy, Elijah. They have eyes everywhere." "We won't last 5 minutes," says Jonas, one of the most experienced members of the group. But before the discussion can continue, a sudden explosion interrupts the meeting. The ceiling of the hideout partially collapses, and the cold light of the drones invades the space. Screams echo as the group tries to escape through the opposite tunnel. The sound of military boots quickly approaches. Elias leads the group through a maze of tunnels, guided only by his memory and faith that he is doing the right thing. Despite their attempts to outwit the soldiers, many members of the group are captured. When they finally manage to emerge into a forest on the outskirts of the city, only 5 survivors remain, including Elias. The small group takes refuge in a clearing, exhausted and shaken. For the first time, Elias feels the weight of responsibility. His decisions have cost the lives of many friends, and he wonders if it's worth continuing. But then, something unexpected happens. A mysterious woman appears in the clearing, dressed in a cloak that seems to glow in the moonlight. Her name is Miriam, and she says she has information that could change the course of the resistance. Miriam claims to have worked within the beast system. She knows the secrets behind the brand and reveals something that shocks everyone. The brand is not just a symbol of submission, it is a direct connection to the mind of the beast, allowing it to control thoughts, emotions, and even actions. She also explains that there is a weakness in the system, but accessing that weakness requires immense sacrifice. As Miriam speaks, Elias feels that he has finally found the purpose he has been looking for. He believes that Miriam is part of the prophecies, perhaps even sent by larger forces to guide them. However, not everyone in the group trusts her. Jonas, who managed to escape along with Elias, accuses her of being a spy. How can we trust someone who has worked for them? What if this is a trap? Tension grows in the group. Miriam suggests a new plan: to infiltrate an ancient underground temple where the scriptures that the regime tried to erase from history are stored. These scriptures, she said, contain detailed instructions on how to destroy the beast system. But the temple is located in the center of the city, and the journey there will be extremely dangerous. Elias decides to follow Miriam's plan, even though he knows that it could cost everyone's lives. He feels that there is no other choice. The truth must be revealed, and sacrifice is a price he is willing to pay. The group begins to prepare for the mission, using the few resources they still have. They know they cannot fail, for the fate of humanity hangs in the balance. Meanwhile, in the corridors of power, the beast observes everything through his cameras and agents. She knows of the group's existence and sees Elias as a threat that needs to be eliminated. With an enigmatic smile, the beast orders his soldiers to step up the hunt. They think they can beat me. Little do they know that they are playing exactly on my board. The narrative begins to accelerate. The holdouts walk into the unknown while the beast prepares its next move. Confrontation seems inevitable, and the lines between good and evil begin to blur. What is true? What is manipulation? And how far is Elijah willing to go to deliver mankind? What if the truth they seek is even more frightening than submission itself? The journey to the underground temple is arduous and fraught with danger. Elijah, Miriam, Jonah, and the few remaining survivors advance through hostile terrain, constantly looking over their shoulders. The city, a veritable labyrinth of ruins and advanced technology, is relentlessly monitored by drones and soldiers. Every misstep can be the last. On the way, the group finds a ghost town, abandoned after a bombing ordered by the regime. The oppressive silence is broken only by the sound of the wind and cautious footsteps. The walls of the buildings are still marked with slogans of the regime. Submission is strength, freedom is an illusion, the beast sees everything. These phrases echo in the minds of the resistors, reinforcing what is at stake. As they hide in a partially destroyed building, Miriam shares more details about what awaits them. According to her, the temple contains not only ancient scriptures, but also a key, something that can disable the beast's control over humanity. However, this key is not a physical object, but a knowledge that requires profound sacrifices to be accessed. Miriam hesitates to fully explain what this means, but promises that everything will be revealed in the temple. Jonas, increasingly suspicious, presses Miriam. "You knew too much from the beginning. How can we believe that you are not leading us straight into a trap? Maybe the temple doesn't even exist." Elias, however, defends Miriam, stating that without her, they would be without direction. The group is divided, but there is no time for prolonged debates. Persecution by the regime is getting closer and closer. As they approach the city center, the group is confronted by a new type of threat, the marked. These citizens, completely dominated by the system, act as extensions of the beast's will. They walk the streets in a trance-like state, but can become violent upon detecting any resistance. The scene is terrifying. Men, women and children, all with blank eyes, reciting phrases of the regime as if they were automatons. The beast is my salvation. The brand is my purpose. The group needs to go unnoticed in the midst of these hypnotized crowds. Miriam suggests that they wear robes and cover their faces, pretending to be marked. The plan works for a while, but a small mistake by Jonas, who refuses to recite the slogans, alerts the marked. Suddenly, the crowd turns into an aggressive swarm, chasing the group through the narrow streets. After a frantic chase, Elijah and the others manage to escape through a hidden underground entrance, which Miriam claims is the path to the temple. The group is exhausted, but Elias's resolve remains intact. They enter the tunnel, lighting the way with makeshift flashlights. The air is thick and stuffy, and the walls are covered with ancient symbols that seem to vibrate with a strange energy. Finally, they arrive at the underground temple. The site is vast and majestic, with massive pillars decorated with inscriptions that glow in a golden hue. In the center of the temple, there is a stone table where an ancient manuscript rests, surrounded by symbols that seem to beat like a living heart. Miriam explains that this is the core of the prophecies, the source of all the knowledge needed to overthrow the regime. Elijah approaches the manuscript, but as he touches it, something unexpected happens. An overwhelming vision takes over his mind. He sees scenes from the past, the present, and the future. It sees the rise of the beast, the sufferings of humanity, and the individual choices that have led to the current chaos. He also sees something even more disturbing, a revelation about the true nature of the beast. The vision shows that the beast is not just a charismatic human leader, but a manifestation of all the wrong choices accumulated by humanity over the centuries. It is an entity that feeds on fear, submission, and hopelessness. The mark is not just a physical symbol, but a spiritual pact that connects each person directly to that entity. When Elijah returns to reality, he is shaken but determined. He realizes that the fight is not just against the regime or the beast, but against the fear and apathy that allowed his rise. He tries to share this revelation with the group, but before he can continue, the temple begins to shake. The walls vibrate, and the sound of footsteps echoes through the corridors. The beast is aware of his presence. A horde of regime soldiers invades the temple, accompanied by marked, who advance as if they were an uncontrollable tide. Elijah and the group have no choice but to fight, using the few weapons they have and the knowledge of the temple to gain the upper hand. The battle is fierce, and the group suffers devastating losses. Jonah, who finally begins to trust Elijah, sacrifices his life to delay the soldiers, allowing Elijah and Miriam to reach the heart of the temple. With enemies at the door, Elijah and Miriam discover what appears to be a mechanism on the temple floor, activated by the manuscript's inscriptions. Miriam reveals that this mechanism is the key. It can disable the beast's control, but it requires extreme sacrifice. Elijah realizes what this means and, despite his fear, decides that he is ready to do whatever it takes. What would you be willing to sacrifice to save humanity? As the sounds of battle draw closer, Elijah and Miriam come face to face with the mechanism at the heart of the temple. The machine, made up of intricate gears and pulses of golden light, feels alive. The inscriptions around him shine brightly, projecting fleeting images that Elijah recognizes as fragments of human history. It is as if the device carries the essence of all the choices made by humanity over the centuries. Miriam, now calmer than ever, explains, "This mechanism is an offering to the heavens. It requires the soul connection of someone pure enough to balance the weight of the corrupt choices that feed the beast. Elijah, you have seen what I have seen. You know that this sacrifice is inevitable." Elijah, still panting from the sight and the battle, hesitates. He remembers his sister and the promises he made to protect her, to rebuild a future together. However, Miriam's words and the weight of responsibility fall on him like an avalanche. If we don't do this now, all those who still have hope will be destroyed. Time is running against them. The group of marked men and soldiers who were chasing the group invaded the main hall of the temple. Miriam, showing unexpected courage, stands between them and Elijah, holding a small gun. "Go, Elias, complete your mission. I'm going to delay them." Elias tries to argue, but Miriam gives him no choice. She turns to face him one last time, her eyes charged with determination. "You are the chosen one. Finish what we started." Elias approaches the mechanism. As it touches its surface, an energy field surrounds its body. He feels an indescribable force run through his soul, exposing every thought, every memory, and every fear he has ever dared to admit. The mechanism begins to rotate, emitting a deafening sound. Golden lights spread across the hall, temporarily blinding everyone present. The beast, who had followed the events remotely through his soldiers, realizes what is happening. The leader's voice resounds through the communication devices. "Stop him! Don't let him activate the device." The soldiers intensify their attacks, but Miriam, using every ounce of her strength, manages to take down several of them before being hit. She falls to the ground, mortally wounded, but with a serene smile on her face. "It was worth it," she whispers, as the golden light of the mechanism floods the temple. Elias, now completely connected to the mechanism, enters into one last vision. He sees an alternative future, a world where humanity is freed from the oppression of the beast, where people once again find hope and unity. But he also realizes the price. His very being will be absorbed by the mechanism, an irreversible sacrifice. He remembers his sister's words, moments before they were separated. "Sometimes we need to lose so that others can win." With tears streaming down his face, Elias accepts his fate. "If it means my sister and others like her will have a chance, then so be it." He activates the mechanism completely, and a blinding flash fills the temple. In the next instant, a blast of energy is released, disabling all of the beast's marked and technologies in a massive radius. Soldiers fall to the ground unchecked, and the regime's surveillance system is annihilated. The energy spreads throughout the city and eventually the world. Meanwhile, Elijah feels his existence fade. He becomes part of the machine, an eternal echo within the temple. His last vision is that of his sister, smiling in a free world. When the light dissipates, Miriam, with her last strength, observes the temple now in silence. Those marked around are unconscious, and the threat seems to have disappeared. She whispers, "You did it, Elijah. You did it." The temple begins to crumble, but before everything collapses, a small capsule is expelled from the central mechanism. Inside is a glowing symbol and an engraved message. The sacrifice of one can save many, but it is up to the many to keep the flame burning. Miriam holds the capsule as her eyes close. His last thought is one of gratitude, not just for Elijah, but for all who fought and believed that a better future was possible. What will we do with the freedom that has been given back to us? Days pass after the temple event. The city, once dominated by the forces of the beast, now finds itself in a state of eerie tranquility. The energy that sustained the totalitarian regime has been destroyed, and the technology used to control the masses is inoperative. However, this silence is more than just the absence of oppression. It is the pause before the dawn of a new era. The few survivors of the group of resistors begin to reorganize. Led by Sarah, Elijah's sister, they become the new nucleus of hope for humanity. The capsule left by Elijah in the temple is now treated as a sacred symbol, carrying the message he engraved with his sacrifice. Sarah, as she looks at the wreckage of the temple, feels the responsibility that now rests on her shoulders. "My brother gave us a second chance," she tells the group, "but one chance is all we have. There will be no other divine intervention. It's in our hands to decide what kind of world we build going forward." The group decides to act. They begin to transmit messages to the surrounding cities using old radios and other devices not controlled by the regime. Sarah's words echo over long distances. Oppression is over. Elijah's sacrifice gave us freedom, but freedom without purpose is just as dangerous as the control we face. We need to come together, rebuild, and make sure we never go back to the way we were. Meanwhile, rumors are beginning to emerge. Some people claim to have visions of Elijah, not as a human, but as a shining presence who appears in dreams and moments of despair. These visions speak of courage, faith, and the importance of conscious choices. While no one can confirm the veracity of these stories, they become legends, inspiring entire communities to resist chaos and the return of any form of oppression. However, not everything is tranquility. Even with the destruction of the beast's core system, many of the former followers still roam the world. Without direct control, they become savages, attacking those who do not possess the mark. These factions pose a new challenge to the resistors, forcing them to form alliances and create defenses as they try to spread their message of hope. A new beginning. Elijah's capsule, containing his message and the shining symbol, becomes a worldwide icon. New communities spring up around what is now called the promise of Elijah. These communities reject oppressive technology, but not completely. They learn to use it ethically, ensuring that it is never again used to manipulate or subjugate. The lessons of the past are taught to all generations. Schools are created to study the history of resistance and understand the mistakes that led to the rise of the beast. Books once banned are now mass-printed, and communication becomes the main weapon of the new humanity. Sarah, now a globally recognized leader, travels between communities, carrying Elijah's capsule as a physical reminder of her sacrifice. In each speech, she repeats the words he left. The sacrifice of one may save many, but it is up to the many to keep the flame burning. The flame, as it calls it, represents not only freedom, but the responsibility of each individual to protect what has been conquered. And so, slowly, the scars of the beast's regime begin to heal. A new threat. However, like any great advance, the newly acquired freedom comes with challenges. In some regions, leaders emerge, preaching ideals of force and control under the guise of protecting their communities. The legacy of the beast still hangs like a shadow, showing that evil can resurface in different forms. Sarah understands that the fight is not over. The real battle, she says in a globally broadcast speech, is not against a tyrant or an ideology. It is against our own inclination to complacency. We must remain vigilant. We must choose freedom every day. Elijah, in his last words before joining the mechanism, spoke of a future where sacrifice would be just the beginning. Now Sarah and her allies realize what this means. Humanity's true test is not just surviving, but growing and learning from its choices. Elijah's sacrifice saved mankind. But what will you do with the freedom you now have? What happens when freedom finally arrives, but the price of choice is higher than we ever imagined? With the end of the age of the beast and the reconstruction of the world, the new generations begin to question the true nature of freedom. Elijah's sacrifice, which ensured humanity's survival, not only gave them a second chance, but also left a question echoing in their hearts. How far would they be willing to go to maintain this freedom? The communities, now prosperous, are beginning to live in harmony, but the scars of the past are still deep. Some began to question the sacrifices made, asking if Elijah, Miriam, and so many others died in vain, or if, in fact, their choices were the only possible ones to prevent the rise of a new tyranny. Sarah, as a leader, finds herself at a crossroads. On the one hand, she wants to protect the new generations from the weight of the past, to teach them the value of freedom won with so much sacrifice. But on the other hand, she knows that the fight never ends. History is cyclical, and humanity, although it has been saved from the beast, continues to face the dilemmas that come with power and freedom. We can't forget, Sarah says firmly. Freedom is never free. To maintain it, we need to understand the mistakes of the past, our own mistakes. True freedom comes with responsibility, and as long as the beast is out of control, its seeds can still grow if we're not careful. What Sarah and the others resist understanding is that no matter how hard they fight against oppression, humanity will always have to face its own nature and the temptation of control, whether in the name of order, security, or power. Even after the defeat of the beast, the real test for the new rulers will be to prevent the cycle of tyranny from repeating itself. The mystery of the new order. As the world tries to reorganize itself, something is starting to happen in some parts of the planet. Small resistance movements emerge, but now with a peculiarity. They do not speak out against the beast, but against the leaders of the new communities, accusing them of replicating the same systems of control and manipulation that have been brought down. There is a new kind of brand emerging, no longer physical but ideological. A brand that goes beyond numbers or symbols. An invisible mark which defines who can have a voice and who must be silenced. Are we building a new beast without realizing it? Asks one of the oldest survivors, now exiled in a distant land. What Elijah left us was a lesson, but the lesson is not over. True freedom requires that we always question and never accept a single truth. The answer to this new question remains ambiguous. As much as nations rise again, the desire to control and organize, often born of good intentions, begins to form a new type of regime. What seemed to be a free society is beginning to be filled by new masters, disguised as saviors, who also manipulate the hope of the masses. The eternal struggle, freedom versus control. Behind the scenes of the restored cities, as the people celebrate their apparent freedom, some begin to wonder who is really in control. Those who resist become more and more vigilant. While the official narrative celebrates Elijah's sacrifice as the end of the fight, others point to the darker truth. The battle was never just against the beast. It is only the reflection of human failures, the temptations of domination, and the need for power. And so the struggle against control turns into a never-ending battle where every victory can spawn a new form of oppression. We have freed ourselves from the beast, but what awaits us now? Sarah, once again in a global speech, tries to warn the new generations, but realizes that her words do not have the same impact. Many now see the struggle for freedom as a distant memory, a story of courage and sacrifice that seems to have been overcome by the need to live in peace. Yet a whisper runs through the streets and fields, an ancient wisdom that says true freedom is not won once. It is conquered every day by every choice. The end of the age of the beast does not mark the end of humanity's journey. On the contrary, it symbolizes the starting point for a new cycle, the cycle of eternal choice. Freedom, after every sacrifice, reveals itself not only as a blessing, but as a burden, a responsibility to be carried by all. Sarah, looking at the horizon, with the symbol of Elijah in her hand, knows that the real challenge is just beginning. What will she and the others do with the world that has been given to them? Will they continue to protect Elijah's ideals, or will they succumb to the temptation to create a new, equally oppressive order under a new face? The audience, now immersed in the complexity of this new reality, is left with one last reflection. Are you ready to make the choices necessary to maintain freedom? Or can the mark of oppression, though different, still be accepted by you? What would you do if you had the power to decide? The screen darkens, leaving the audience with the feeling that the story, while seemingly concluded, is far from having a clear answer. What they will do with the freedom won, only time will tell.